and I'm super excited to be here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Marcy. I am the head of learning at Gatsby, which I guess most of you probably know what Gatsby is. But it's a website framework that I love. I use it for my own site. And I just want to give you all some encouragement that if you want to contribute to Gatsby, 2 thumbs up and we can help you. So a little plug for that. Today we're going to go on a live debugging adventure for accessibility, because that's something I care a lot about. And in this room, we all have a lot of power to make a difference in the world. So I'm going to show you how I debug websites and web applications for accessibility so that you can go do that. We definitely can't get to it all. We only have 20 minutes. So we're going to see how far we get. And we're going to do that by looking at an application that I've written intentionally with some accessibility problems, which is a little challenging for me because I had to kind of turn my brain off a little bit to I just want to fix things all the time. So there's some pretty horrendous bugs in here that we're going to look at them broken, and then we'll look at a version of the app where they are fixed. And so hopefully you can take away from this a process. More than any one technique, it's more about the process of debugging applications for accessibility so that people with disabilities can use them. Because with all of the apps that we build, we can make such a difference and actually enrich people's lives, give them more independence, more privacy, security, and things just by enabling them to use our sites and apps. So without further ado, let's take a look at this app that I've got. My slides are not really slides. It's a repository on GitHub called Empathy-Driven Development. And so we're going to learn how to code with empathy. So the README has some resources, talks a little bit about which components we're going to look at. There's a sidebar menu, a form, a carousel, a modal dialog, and a little card flip. We're just going to go poke around, see what's broken, identify how we can fix things. If you're new to accessibility, I have a bunch of resources here that you can look at after the talk. Things like how to get started in accessibility, how to write automated tests for accessibility, because you can bake this stuff into your apps and really share the responsibility with your teammates. If you write something and you assert in an automated test that it should work for accessibility, and then maybe your teammate breaks it, or maybe you break it, because that happens, that automated testing can really help you bake that into your workflow. So I'm in Visual Studio Code. I've got this Gatsby app. I've actually converted it from Create React App to Gatsby, just for funsies, because I work at Gatsby. But it actually takes some of the heavy lifting off of my plate. So Gatsby does a lot of stuff under the hood with Redux so that I can just concentrate on writing components. On my own website, I can focus on writing blog posts and content and not worry about reducers and really things that would just distract me from creating content. So in our application, really the guts of what we're going to look at are the components. So we have a number of pages. Let's see if I can. No, I can't move that. OK, so we've got, let's go look at our index page first. So this is the landing page of our app. And actually, we should go take a look at this app as well. So I've got a little outdoor trip organizer because I really like doing things outside. And when I go on a trip, I want to know what I should take with me. And wouldn't it be nice if I could just type some stuff in a form and have it output a list for me to check things off as I'm packing? So there's a form here, an image. There's this little sliding sidebar nav thing that comes off of the side. It has some links in it. We've got a modal dialog that opens with a form. Forms are really commonly accessibility issues. We've got a gallery here with some images. And not to spoil the fun, but I took this gallery from W3 Schools. So yeah, we're going to dive into what they're doing there. It's not good. We've got a gear packing list that, as I'm building this app out, this is where that form on the homepage I'll start to match up types of trips with different gear that I might bring. Like if I'm going out in the backcountry in the winter, I know I'm going to need a beacon and my snow pants and my gloves and all that stuff that if you forget your snowboard boots, you're going to have a miserable time. So that's where the future of this app will be more of matching those lists. Depending on what type of trip I'm going on, I could bring a friend. So I could bring my dog on a lot of these adventures. And he's a Labradoodle and squeaks a lot, so I call him Squealy Dan sometimes. Loves cheese. I don't think the cat can really come as much as she would really like to. She's always at the window pawing when we're leaving, like, can I come? And unfortunately, she can't. But I really want a mini horse, and if I had one, I could take it hiking. So the mini horse could be considered for, a companion on some of these trips. So it's a big component to planning, depending on if I want to take a friend with me. So for this app, I'm going to show you how I would debug for accessibility. The first, most basic tool you already have is the keyboard. So if I just start tabbing through this web page, I can't really see where I am. Okay, now I'm in the form, and I have this blue outline for the focus. But there's more stuff on here that I just can't always see where I am. Like, I think we missed this modal launch button. And if I go back under so the live transcription is sort of covering, but at the bottom, my status bar, I'm seeing some links. And I think those are in this menu. So unfortunately, when my menu is closed, keyboard users are still going through the items. And this happens a lot with mega menus, inactive content that maybe visually you can't see, but we haven't properly disabled it. So that's a good problem to fix. This menu also, I can't even get to the menu button. So if I were debugging this, I would do a inspect element and go and look. And sure enough, it's just a div. So problem with that is that it's not reachable with the keyboard. So I can't get to it to operate it. It's for mouse users only, which is pretty exclusionary. So we could fix that. When we open the menu, we want to send focus into it so that a user can be in the right place in the application. We want to send probably focus to the first item, I would guess. If I hit the escape key, fortunately that's working, but I need to send focus back to where we came from. This is really common in these sliding side navs. If you have modals, that's a similar idea where you need to send focus into it. So if we look at our modal, it's actually doing it for us. I used React Modal, and they are handling focus when it opens, which is great. But we need to send focus back. And I think we skipped this button as well. So that is another div, which, raise your hand if you've seen that before. Yeah, and I think for styling purposes, I don't know, it's like just a little bit of boilerplate CSS. You can style a real button however you like. So I think we're all capable of doing that. So there's definitely some items to fix here with semantic elements like the button element, focus management. And I uncovered a lot of that just by hitting the tab key to try and reach what's called interactive controls. So anything that you have a hover on or a click event, your kind of spidey senses should go up and go, wait a minute, what about the keyboard? And screen readers as well, which kind of piggyback onto the keyboard. So the next tool that I would use if I were debugging for accessibility would be an automated checker like the Axe Core extension. So I have this installed. It is called Axe. I used to work there, so I'm a pretty big fan. There's other tools as well you can use. But if I run an analysis on this page, I get all of these handy items that I could go and fix, sort of the low-hanging fruit things that can be automated. Things like these buttons that don't have any text in them, so a screen reader user wouldn't know what to do with them. There's a color contrast issue here of this white on top of the kind of periwinkle blue background. And I have sort of trained my eyes to identify low contrast text. But until you kind of hone in that skill, an automated checker can help you identify those problems. So we really just need a darker text color so that it stands out on the background. And if you could focus on one accessibility issue, that would probably be it. I mean, there's a lot of them, but that's the #1 accessibility issue, like far and away, is color contrast. So we could fix that. We've got some form labels that are missing. Unfortunately, the placeholder attribute is not quite enough, so we need a real label element. We've got a couple of those. We've got some content that isn't in a landmark. So just kind of looks like the body of this app is not contained in a landmark element, which means a screen reader user won't be able to jump to that section in the page as easily. So we could fix that by adding a main landmark. And once you fix these issues, you can go through and verify that they've been fixed. So that, along with the keyboard stuff, you can get pretty far. So let's go over to our code. That's the sort of broken state of the code. And in my Gatsby app, where a lot of this stuff lives, I mean, we could probably spend a few hours going through this app. So what I've actually done is shown or staged some of this content in a Git branch so that you can go and check it out after the talk, go poke around, maybe flip back and forth, go see the broken thing, go look at the fixed thing, and try to see how you could fix it to make it better. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to go check this out. So I'm going to do git checkout fixes, because that is the branch where I have fixed a lot of this stuff. So there's things like the color contrast that we saw. And if I refresh this page, I can tell that this has been fixed a little bit since that white text color is now a darker color. And if I tab through the page now, I'm actually handling focus better. And so I can tab onto that button. I can hit the Enter key. I can hit the Escape key and break it. Kind of not really unexpected when you're doing live demos. So there's some things that are working here. Let's go look at where that stuff lives in the code. So my index page in Gatsby allows me to use components for reusable things. So I have a layout component where it's like a lot of the kind of controls panel of all of my components live. That's where I compose things like a header and a lot of content. So let's go look at the layout component. There's a bunch of good stuff in here. I'm kind of converting from Create React App into Gatsby now and learning how to use hooks. So I've got a use state and a use ref hook in here that are really nice for both managing state and handling focus. And I know there's some new APIs coming in React for managing focus that I'm really excited about. Things like managing focus traps. So in this layout component, it is a functional component. It's setting some state. There's some GraphQL here to pull in my site's title and description, and that's pulling it from the Gatsby config file, so I don't have to try and like manually pass all of the stuff around. I can just use Gatsby's data layer to go and grab some of that content. When the menu opens, I'm going and I store a ref to identify that first element in that sidebar. And that way, when it opens, I can call a focus on that element and send the user to the right place. So if we scroll down, we can see the JSX for this component, so the templating part. What I love about Gatsby is that I can write in JavaScript, but it will output HTML and CSS that will render from a server. So I'm not completely relying on JavaScript for everything. That means that my pages will work without JavaScript turned on, which is great. I think there's sort of a threshold of things that will require JavaScript. I think that's fine. But at least your core pages, your core user workflows should work without JavaScript. And we can debate it. You can fight me. But I like that Gatsby makes it a lot easier to do that, at least for your straightforward pages. So we've got this menu. And the menu component is a class component that's what's awesome about Gatsby as well, is I can use React components in Gatsby and kind of use it in both ways altogether to compose. So you can use things you find out there on the web, and hopefully you can debug them for accessibility and file issues in those repos. So things like using refs for this first item. And when I click on it, and since it is a link, the click event will fire from the keyboard, I can focus on the main element, which we added to. So there's this main element down here that was just a div before. And to be more semantic, I've converted it to a main element. That will tell assistive technology that this is the main content of my app. And that way you can navigate by landmarks in a screen reader. The header is a similar item. If we go look at the header component, that's a component that I can use a semantic element like header in HTML5, but I can put other things in it and make it more reusable. So inside of there is the button to launch that modal. I converted it from a div that we skipped past before. Now I can reach it as an HTML button. It has an ARIA label attribute of open newsletter signup, because if we go look at that again, That's this button up here. And it has a newsletter sign-up form. So, depending on what's in your modal, you could label it as open modal, but it was a bit more descriptive to say open newsletter sign-up, because that will motivate a user to actually open the thing. Otherwise, they'll be like, it's a modal. Modals are terrible for accessibility most of the time. So a little more descriptive. My close button is now focusable, so I can tell that it's a reachable button with this blue outline. And that means I can use the keyboard now to toggle back and forth. So instead of just missing it completely as a keyboard user, now you can reach all of these things. So let's go keep touring our code. So that was the header component. This is where that white text color, I changed it from white to a dark gray. And I will show you another tool that I use to debug. And actually, if we go run the Axe extension again, we'll go see, voila, those items were magically fixed from all the work that I did earlier. But you can benefit from those fixes just by looking at the Git branch on here. What I want to show you, however, is a tool that I absolutely love. So in Chrome Developer Tools, if I go to the Elements panel and I select an element with this, the first control here in the tabs to select an element in the page and inspect it, now Chrome gives you this little hover with some great information about what element it is, what the font style is, the color, and then this little item called contrast. And it says AA 6.55. And that's talking about the ratio of the color of the foreground on the background. So you can calculate a ratio to say, does this have enough contrast? And what's super cool now is if I select that element in the DevTools, and I go over to this little color swatch in the right side, I can open the color picker and see if we can move the browser a little bit to see everything. There now in this color picker panel is a contrast ratio experience that is super awesome. If you're trying to pick a color, maybe you just want to budget a little bit and not tell your design team that you're changing it. Because you could stay in the same area of the color wheel and just drag this around and see how the colors, if they meet contrast requirements or not. And I got to tell you, when I started, this did not exist, and it would have been really nice. So lucky you. So super cool. You can fix that easily. Sometimes it's just a slight change, and that's why I say you don't have to tell the design team because they may never know. You keep it similar enough, but then with a crappy projector or for someone with low vision, it can make a huge difference. So that color thing got fixed. So I love that tool. I'm going to show you one last thing. There's obviously a lot more that we could cover. In the last 2 minutes, I want to show you how to automate some of the testing. So we saw the Axe extension. That API can be used in your automated tests. And in Gatsby, we use Cypress. So I've got Cypress set up. I have this spec for my nav, and I've just started converting this. I think I used Selenium WebDriver before in Create React App. This time I'm using Cypress because there's a lot of really great tooling. It's got a great API and awesome documentation. So I'm also using a tool called Cypress Axe that will bind Cypress with the Axe score library, and it will inject it into the browser for you to run accessibility tests. So that way you can automate some of this stuff and hold yourself and your teammates accountable. So let's go run this on the command line. I am going to run it. Another thing I love about VS Code is I can run the terminal right in my IDE, which is amazing. So I'm just going to do npm run test, and it will go look for the site running on localhost. It will, if it's not already running, it'll spin up an instance in the browser, and Cypress should hopefully open here in a minute if the demo gods will play along. So this is the Cypress interface. It'll automatically launch it for you and give you an environment to go and debug, which is great for browser testing. We only have one test file here, but if there were others, they would all be listed. So it's going and injecting Axe into the page for us. And a lot of those issues we saw in the browser extension have already been fixed. But if we hadn't fixed them yet, they would show up here, which is great. And we've got an element with a focusable labeled button, which would have failed before because it wasn't focusable, it didn't have a label. But now I've got this baked in, and so that's pretty great for team productivity. So we've got some testing. You can go and find this repo on GitHub. And if you have any questions about accessibility or about Gatsby, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter. I could talk literally all day about this. So I hope that you can take away from this some of the process of debugging apps for accessibility, because we really do have a lot of power in this room to make a difference. So go forth and test for accessibility. Thanks so much.